Legislative Director. In my role, I manage the Assembly members' grants, legislation, and budget items. And tonight, we're honored to have our facilitators, Arva Rice from the New York Urban League and Michael Hickey from the Citizens Committee. They'll be leading a discussion on how groups can become a 501c3, a registered nonprofit organization, and we'll be speaking about how groups can secure funding. For Assemblymember Jackson's office, we award 2 types of grants to groups. However, to be eligible, you need to be a registered nonprofit. This includes obtaining a 501c3 status and being able to show specific documentation. For example, a certificate of incorporation, a 990 tax filing form, and a CHAR 500. And this applies to all New York State Assembly offices. Before we begin, just want to also share a few housekeeping notes. If you guys can, please ensure your name is displayed. If you have any questions or comments throughout the presentation, please use the chat box. Our office will be monitoring the chat to make sure all questions are tracked and addressed. We're asking everyone to please keep your microphone muted during the presentation and the Q&A sessions until we call on you. Thank you again for being here tonight, and I'm going to turn it over to Assemblymember Jackson for her opening remarks.
Okay, well, good evening, everyone. Thank you, Dorcia, for starting us out. I am very excited to have this conversation, to start talking about how to support our nonprofits. You're going to get a wealth of information today from Arva, from Mike, from Dorcia, about how our nonprofits can actually, hold on, TJ, how our nonprofits can actually make sure that their paperwork is in order and serve the people that they really were designed to serve. So thank you to my team for putting this together, and I pass it on over to the presenters.
Thank you, Assemblymember Jackson. We're going to start with an icebreaker activity. I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Arva Rice from the New York Urban League.
Good evening, everyone. It is wonderful to see you all this evening. I, as you all heard, am Arva Rice. I have the incredible privilege of serving as president and CEO of the New York Urban League. I'm saying hello to you from the village of Harlem. And I want to thank the Assemblywoman for inviting me to be part of this conversation and letting a Harlemite be part of a Bronx-based person's conversation. So yes, thank you for that. I appreciate it. So I have a couple of questions that I'm going to ask you all, and I want you to respond by dropping your responses into the chat. And then we're going to launch into our conversation today. I am absolutely thrilled to be doing this conversation with Mike from the Citizens New York, because they do this work all the time and every day. So anything that I am not able to get to, I'm excited that he will be able to cover as well. So thank you for your partnership on this project. So I have a couple of questions that I'm going to ask you all. When you think about nonprofits, the reason why people put them together is because they have often identified some wrong that they want to right, something that they see in the world that's just, it bothers them, it troubles them, it pulls at their spirit. So if you can drop into the chat, hopefully you all know how to use that function, because I saw you all introducing themselves. Tell us, what is the wrong that you would like to right in your nonprofit organization? Just drop that on in the chat. What's the wrong that you're trying to right in your nonprofit? Whether it's an idea or whether it's a fully formed concept, but I know there's a wrong that you're trying to right. So drop that on in there.
Arva, you mean like a problem we're trying to solve?
A problem you're trying to solve, a wrong that you're trying to right, something that just irritates you, that bothers the life out of you, that you want to make better. That's what I'm asking. A problem that you're trying to solve, or a wrong that you're trying to right, something that you're trying to just improve in your community. Any of those things. Oh, I love this. Social and financial inequality, improving services for those who are trying to do re-entry, salon barber services for foster children and seniors, people trying to address homelessness, real-time resources for people, once again, returning from recidivism, trying to address the more access to green space, helping young people making decision-making, mental health and hygiene, oh my goodness, food insecurity, providing affordable housing, jobs for young people. These are all fantastic problems that we really need to have some innovative solutions to. So thank you so much for sharing those. And I'll see those as they continue to come in. So what are the problems? What is the issue that you're trying to address? Domestic violence, yeah, that's a big one. So thank you so much for dropping those in there. I want to get this a little bit of a sense of who's on the call. Who are the folks who have gathered this evening for this conversation? So if you have an idea, something that you're thinking about, something that you would love to see happen in terms of maybe putting together a nonprofit, if you're in the thinking stage, if you can drop a 1 in the chat. If you're the folks that are thinking about an idea, thinking about something that you might like to do, I want you to drop a 1 into that chat. If you are somebody who's already got, I'm set. I know what I want to do. I maybe even have looked up some things. I've done some research on the web, or I've had some conversations with some people. You're a 2. So you can drop that 2 into the chat that you're actually a little bit on your way. And then the last, because I know, like I said, Mike, at the second part of this conversation is going to be talking a little bit more about fundraising. If you're already up and going and you're here because, no, I want to hear about the resources. How do I get that money? How do I get this flowing? How do I get that rolling? Then you're a 3. So if you're one of those 3s, you're looking for the funding, you're already kind of in place, drop that through. Oh, I see those 3s. I see those 3s. That's amazing. Okay, so now I know. So that's great. So we just have some 1s, some 2s, and some 3s. I have just a couple more questions before I get into what's going to be my content for today. And I wanted to ask if anyone has any idea, how many nonprofits do you think operate in New York City? If you were to have to estimate, just to think about it, how many do you think operate in New York City? Right, exactly. Question mark, question mark, question mark. How many operate in New York City? What do you think? I'm seeing over 130, over a million, That's a bit of a stretch. A lot, 50,000, 20,000, 100, 500. These are all great answers. It looks like, they flew by me too fast in order for me to say who was closest to the answer. But according to the statistic I latest looked up, there are 46,214 nonprofits operating in New York City. 46,214. Wow, exactly. And you know that they take on, some nonprofits are hospitals, some are universities, and all the things in between, very small grassroots organizations and huge million-dollar organizations that all are nonprofits. And so that's why I'm going to start this conversation and this topic where I'm about to start, just because we know there's so many nonprofits that are taking on really, yes, exactly. 46,214 is the number that I came up with. So it's an awful lot of them doing really terrific things, but clearly there is still a lot more work to be done. So one other quick question, and then I will dive into the content of my conversation today. And that question is, how many staff members do you all think you need to have in place before you can start a nonprofit? How many staff people do you think you need to have in place in order to start a nonprofit? Let's see, we've got 1, we've got 3, we've got 0, we've got 8, 1 to 3, 4, 5, 1, 1 to 5. That's great. 1 plus a board. Oh, see, some of you all know where this is going. Some of you all know where this is going. That's terrific. Those are great answers. Just so you all know, in order to start a nonprofit, you don't have to have staff in place, but you do have to have a board in place. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. There are nonprofit organizations. I see you nodding your head, Mr. Bennett. You know the deal. There are nonprofit organizations that operate purely with volunteers and do an amazing job of doing that. And at some point, they get larger and larger. They decide that they need to have staff. But in order to get started, you don't necessarily need to have staff people, but there are some things that you do need to have in place. And so I'm going to go ahead, and if I can do this correctly, please bear with me as I share with you a little bit of my PowerPoint presentation with you all today. As you all heard, I have the incredible privilege of serving as president and CEO of the New York Urban League. We are a nonprofit organization that's been operating over 100 years that works to provide equality of access for African Americans unapologetically. And our work is in education, employment, and advocacy. And one of the other things that we do is we operate a grant program, our nonprofit stabilization fund, that gives nonprofit organizations an opportunity to apply for capacity building grants. So, and we can talk more about that to the level of people that are interested in that. So, the reason why I asked you a couple of those questions in the beginning of the conversation, there's a lot of threes. So that means that you're already in nonprofit organizations. So this may be kind of a refresher for you, and or you could be working in a nonprofit organization and say, you know what, there's another project that I would like to see put into place. So I'm going to go ahead and fairly quickly walk through these questions because it's a lot of real estate to cover, but I want to give you some time to answer any questions that you have. So some of the things that I want you to consider before you start a nonprofit, because starting a nonprofit is not a small endeavor. There's a lot of things that you need to do in order to keep that entity up and going and making sure that it stays within the legal and regulations that accompany nonprofits. So you want to be serious about making this decision. So the first thing that you want to do when you're considering starting a nonprofit is to think about what's your mission. What are the things, what's the right that you want to wrong? What's the problem that you want to solve? What is it that you really want to address with your nonprofit, and how are you going to do that? What are the programs and services that you're going to offer? What is your mission statement? What is it that you want to do in the world? And I would encourage anybody who's thinking about mobilizing and putting together a nonprofit, you must have that mission statement in place in order to make that happen. I talked about this in the beginning of the conversation, and I phrase it as, what wrong is it that you're trying to right? And thank you so much to the assembly member for rephrasing that and asking people, what is the problem? What's the problem that you're trying to solve? And what's the programs and services that you're going to provide? So that's something that you want to make sure that you have in place. You also want to figure out how much the programs and services are going to cost. So what is it that you're going to need in order to get your programs operating? It's just, money for snacks for after school. Is it going to be tutoring money for tutors? What are the costs that you need to think about when putting together your nonprofit? A couple of other questions that I want you to keep in mind is nonprofits are a legal entity, and so that means that you need to make sure that you can stay compliant, right? So how is your nonprofit going to make sure that you stay within the rules and the guidelines in which you put together? Part of that is through bylaws, and bylaws are something that you're going to need to create. And I'll give you all a list of resources that are going to help you to do that. But you want to ask the question, if you're putting together a nonprofit organization, how are you going to be able to stay compliant? The other thing that I ask you all to think about is, what is it about your program that's going to be different? You want to do a basketball program, you recognize that the young people in your community are hanging out on the streets, don't have a lot of things to do. A basketball program isn't necessarily something new. It may be new in your community, though. It may be new, the type of the young people that you're looking to serve. It may be new because of the different offerings that you're planning to put together. But you need to think about what it is about your nonprofit that makes it unique. And then the last piece on things to consider before considering starting a nonprofit is you really need to think about who can be the members of your board of directors. I mentioned and asked the question of how many staff members you need. The fact is that you don't need to have staff members in place in order to start a nonprofit, but you do need to have members to be the folks who are on your board of directors, right? So who are the people that you know who could be on your board of directors and be responsible for the health and well-being of that nonprofit organization? Who are the folks who are going to come together, have meetings? Those meetings are going to need to be recorded. Who are the people who are going to provide input and suggestions, introduce you to other people that you might be able to utilize for fundraising, that sort of thing. But who are the people that are going to be able to help shepherd you in building and growing your nonprofit organization? Those are the folks that you want to join and become members of your board of directors. I also wanted to talk to you about some of the specific legal and financial steps that you need to go forward with your nonprofit. Now, you have to also once you make a decision, yes, I want to go forward and I'm going to create a nonprofit organization, you'll have to make a decision about the structure that you want to do it in, right? So after going through these steps, you may say to yourself, a nonprofit's not what I want, the direction I want to go into. I may want to do an LLC. I want to maybe want to go in the position of doing a business. And Mike could talk to you a little bit more about that as well, as I can, but you want to figure out what the structure of your nonprofit is going to be. And then you may decide after you walk through these steps, you know what I'm trying to do is very similar to what they're doing at the YMCA up the street, or you know what, this is something that I could really do in conjunction with my church. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with building and developing a mentoring program that's in conjunction with another nonprofit organization. You shouldn't feel like you always have to start something new and fresh. There's nothing wrong with starting something new and fresh, but there's also nothing wrong with partnering with somebody as well. Love to hear at the New York Urban League, love to hear people's individual ideas and ways in which we can strengthen them. Like I said, we are able to provide a capacity building grant. So if people are in need of support, they can come to us for that. But they also may want to partner with us and do something in conjunction with some of the existing programs, the schools, the young people, and the adults that we work with. But if you are deciding that you want to go forward and create your own nonprofit, I want to give you a couple of the steps. One of the 4 legal and financial steps, I already talked about this a little bit, and that's the first is identifying those individuals to serve on your board of directors. The second is creating the bylaws to govern the organization. And so the bylaws are basically just like your rule book. What are we doing here? How are we going to do it? How are we going to govern this work? And so that's what is part of the bylaws. And if anybody has any questions, we can talk about that a little bit later. Like I said, a nonprofit is a legal entity, and so you'll need to identify an attorney who can help you to correctly file a certificate of incorporation. And so that's a document that you create that helps you to create a nonprofit organization within New York State. And I'm going to give you a couple of resources so that you can identify some folks who can help you to do that either pro bono meaning free, and or to do it at low cost. And then you're also going to apply for an IRS with the IRS for employer identification number, which is the EIN number. EIN number is kind of like a social security number, but instead of being for you, it's for your business, right? It's for your nonprofit business. And so the EIN number is the number that follows you around every place, and people are able to look it up and say, and make sure that if they have any questions of you. Some of the final legal and financial steps. My time is running. Oh my goodness. That I want to go through, and then I want to give as much time as I can for question and answer. Some of the other things that you'll need to do once you get your once you've identified an accountant, once you've identified a lawyer to help you to file the correct documents, once you've identified your board of directors, once you've identified and put together your bylaws, is then you want to establish a bank account. So you want to establish some place where the monies can go if you're successful in getting a grant. If you have individual friends and family who want to contribute to the success of your nonprofit, you'll need to have some place to put those monies. So you'll need to establish a bank account. Then you want to retain the appropriate financial support in order to be able to do well. So financial expertise can be the bookkeeper. That's the person who's just literally figuring out the money coming in and the money coming out, making sure that you always have more coming in than going out, that you're not operating at a deficit, which is spending more money than you have. And then you'll also need to, depending on how much money that you have in your nonprofit, you may need to file specifically and have an audit that's done. And that you have to deciding on whether you have an audit or not, it's based on the revenues that you have within your nonprofit organization. You're also going to be applying for 501c3 status. 501c3 status is basically, like I said, it's the tax code that allows you to not have to pay taxes, and then also allows people who make a contribution to you to write off that contribution in part of their taxes as well. So you'll need to apply for that. And then you'll register with the Charities Bureau. The Charities Bureau is part of the Attorney General's office, and it is a specific place where if a person wanted to make a contribution, they can look up, once again, that EIN number, which is like your social security number, that can say, look, let's look up the New York Urban League and see if they're in good standing, if they've been doing what they're supposed to do, if they're If there's no fraud that's involved, let's look at the New York Urban League and make sure that everything's on the up and up. Yes, it is. I can make that contribution to them and feel good about that contribution. So those are some of the things that they do at the Charities Bureau at the Attorney General's office. And then you're also going to want to apply for the appropriate tax exemption. So like I said, the 501c3 status allows you to be tax exempt, and then you need to file in order to be able to purchase things at the grocery store or at the local Target and be able to not have to pay taxes because you have the appropriate tax status. I'm going to go to a couple of websites, and then I'm going to give you all a few moments to ask any questions that you have of us. As I mentioned, the Office of the Attorney General, that's where the Charities Bureau is. And so that's the website that is there. I will also make sure that I get this deck to the Assemblywoman's office, so that if you all are interested in it, you can get it as well, or you can take a snapshot of it right now. I talked about getting a certificate of incorporation. Where does one get that? That comes from the Department of State. So there's information on that. You have to have that employer identification number, like your Social Security number. That comes from the IRS. So you want to make sure there's a lot of different places that you have to go to get all this information that comes together that makes you able to do business. So I want to make sure that you all have some of the places that you need to go in order to make all those things happen. And so a resource to you in helping to do that is an organization called Nonprofit New York. All the Nonprofit New York does is work with nonprofit organizations. That helps them to create themselves. It helps them when they are getting up and operational. How do you develop your board of directors? How do you set up your financial systems? And so becoming a member of Nonprofit New York gives you an opportunity to log into and be a part of all the resources that they have available to them. So if you're interested in finding out more about becoming a nonprofit, continuing this conversation, I would encourage you all to look at Nonprofit New York and considering becoming a member. In the beginning of the conversation, I talked to you about the New York Urban League, longtime civil rights organization doing education, employment, and advocacy. And one of the things that we do is we operate a nonprofit stabilization fund. And so we are able to give out just shy of $1 million every year to nonprofit organizations who are looking to build their capacity. So whether they want to develop a strategic plan, whether they need to develop something in terms of their data management system, their financial operations, putting it together systems, but it's specifically money for capacity building, which is hard to get with nonprofit organizations. And so we offer that grant one time a year. And so I encourage you all to look to the NYUL also as an opportunity when you've already established your nonprofit organization and you have been doing that work for 2 years or more, then you can apply for a grant through the Nonprofit Stabilization Fund. So I'm going to take a breath at this moment and see if you all have any questions for me. And Dorothea, let me know if you want if you're going to read them from the chat or if you want people to take themselves off of you.
Hey, Dorothea, sorry, you're
So-
kind of gobbled again.
So there were questions on the chat, they were answered. The last question was based on, as a church with a 501c status, do we need to establish a separate charity under the same status, or would a new one need to be filed for grants and a donation purpose?
The church that already has a 501c3?
Yes.
Correct.
Okay, because sometimes churches are not 501c3s, and so they have to apply for something aside. My church that I attend has a community development corporation in addition to the church itself. But if your church has a 501c3, you should be able to apply for grants with that designation. I think I see Jeanette's hand that's raised.
There's
Yeah.
another question. I'm
Okay.
sorry, Jeanette. They said, okay, I'm so sorry. From Ms. Ada Ritter, is it a cost to join the Nonprofit New York?
Yes, there is a small membership fee, and it's a sliding fee that's based on the size of your budget. So if for most of the people on this call, probably 100% of the call, it's going to be a very minimal cost. So because it's based on your budget size.
Okay, Ms. Jeanette also asked for those organizations that want to be present digitally, are there resources where websites can be developed for us?
I'm going to ask if Mike wants to answer that one as well. I know that for the New York Urban League, our capacity building grant would allow you to be able to allocate some funds in order to build a website. But Mike, do you mind jumping in and answering that as well for me?
Yeah, there's a lot of terrific resources out there for technical support. I'm going to name a few right now, and then I'll drop some links into the chat. One is called TechSoup, which is a really great place to get low cost or free technology. You can buy licenses for Microsoft Word and Excel and other things that you might use to run your organization. And you can get a lot of free classes and technical support and assistance. There's a bunch of organizations that do volunteer projects with nonprofits, like a bunch of those. Literally, if you just Google nonprofit volunteer support, you'll get a big list. But I'll drop a couple of the ones that we work with that I think are really good. And finally, don't be afraid to try AI tools. They're very powerful. You can basically just kind of talk and record yourself, and that will there are AI websites that'll just turn that into a website for you, complete with pictures and everything. So depends on what you're looking for, but you can certainly get a website up really, really, really quickly with some of the new AI tools that are out there. And I'll drop one or two of those in the chat as well.
Thank you so much, Mike, for that. I really appreciate that. And yes, the New York Urban League has definitely worked with at various points with crews of volunteers from corporations who have helped us, whether it is developing our strategic plan or helping us develop a marketing plan. So there's definitely volunteer resources that are available for nonprofits in terms of human resources. And then also, I am now sticking my feet into the world of AI and have had some great results as too. So I encourage us all to not be scared of it, but to step in as well.
Thank you, Ms. Rice. Samuel asks in the chat, when does the Urban League application become available?
The Urban League application for the Nonprofit Stabilization Fund, like I said, we do that once a year, and the RFP is available in November. So we actually just selected the grantees in December, but it's usually due in November of every year.
Okay, thank you. Regina Jones asks in the chat, what if the church doesn't have a 501c3?
And if the church does not have a 501c3, then they would need to go through this process. So they would need to figure out what their mission is. They would need to figure out who they would put on their board of directors. They would need to apply for all the documents that I talked about all through the presentation. They would need to go through that process in order to establish themselves as a nonprofit.
Ms. Keisha McCroskey asked in the chat, if you already have anything in place and you are establishing an organization, I believe she's asking how can she get support. We will be getting into that in the next workshop segment, Ms. McCroskey. Ms. Letitia Thompson asks, how do you get money to build or buy real estate to house your organization?
Can I just tell you, when I figure that out, I'll let you know. The New York Urban League has owned 3 brownstones in Harlem for the last 80 years. And I am in the process of raising money in order to renovate those brownstones. So we have gone to City Council, and City Council has awarded us with support. We have gotten support at the federal level for our project as well. We are in we're not a historic building, but we're in a historic neighborhood. So we'll be applying for some historic preservation monies as well. So those are some of the ways the places that we have gone for support around our building. And I don't know if Mike, if you wanted to add to that one as well.
There's a lot of people that would love to own their own space as nonprofit organizations. It's pretty challenging to do in New York because it's just so darn expensive here. And there's not a lot of resources that are easy to dedicate to capital projects. So I don't think there's an easy answer here. Member Jackson, maybe you have some thoughts on that issue you want to share.
Just a few thoughts. So, real estate is definitely not the easiest thing to get. Not saying it's impossible, but you have to make sure that your organization absolutely needs its own space, right? Right away, because sometimes you can just lease a space. It depends on what you're looking to do. And what Arva and Mike are referring to, what Arva has, trust that you have to have your own capital sometimes up front. And when you're dealing with city council and the state assembly and federal, you have a lot of it is reimbursement. So you have to have a lot of this capital and raise this money first, and then you get reimbursed for it. So yeah, real estate is not the easy thing to get, but you can get it.
Mm-hmm.
And you can write for grants to help you with spaces and things of that nature.
Mm-hmm.
But
And please,
we don't partner enough with other people who have the same mission as us, and a lot of us want to do it on our own instead of like creating a partnership and collaboration. But I'll leave it at that.
mm-hmm. And the only thing I wanted to add was we're about, I would say, we're at the beginning of this process. We're very, very fortunate to have the property and have raised some monies. But please keep in mind, New York Urban League, because in the next 2 years or so, we'll actually have space for other nonprofits, and wanting to do exactly what the assembly member was saying is that once we're done and we've created our Black Center for Excellence, it's going to be come and be part of the real estate that we want to make it available to the larger community.
Alrighty, we have a question from Katisha Deacon for the New York Urban League grant. Do we have to be operating for 2 years under the 501c3 status, or just operating as a not-for-profit for 2 years already?
You have to, and this is a rule that comes from us, the fact that the monies that we use for this is city tax levy monies. And so the nonprofit organization has to have been in operation for 2 years with the 501c3. But there are other funding that is available that Mike's going to talk about more in his part of the section. But particularly for the New York Urban League capacity building grant, you have to have been in operation for 2 years with a 501c3.
Thank you, Ms. Rice. We're going to take one more question for this Q&A session and come to other questions after Mike's presentation. Nicole asked in the chat, I would like to get a 501c3 and have different events on behalf of my son. Do you have any suggestions?
You want to get the first part was they want to establish a 501c3, and the second part was
they host different events on behalf of their son. Do you have any suggestions on how they can go about getting a 501c3?
Sure. So I'm assuming that there's something with their son that they're dedicated to. So whether it was whether it's a having to address a disease, or maybe it was something having to do with violence in the community or what have you. So it looks like you're wanting to dedicate something either to your son's memory or something that's happening with him right now. So first of all, kudos to you. I think that's a wonderful mission to have for a nonprofit organization. And so you would go through the steps of figuring out what are the other people in your life who could serve on that board of directors and help you into making that into a reality, and then walk through the steps of being able to apply for your for all the certifications that you need in order to get established. And so we just walk through and go through those steps after you've identified some folks who share your vision.
Thank you, Ms. Rice. Okay, we're going to pass it over to Michael for his presentation, and then we're going to come back to the other questions in the next Q&A session.
Okay, that's great. I'm going to share my screen. When you do that in Zoom, it does really make it hard to see the chat. And man, the chat is lit. There's so many great questions in there. It's really excellent. I'm so glad you guys are popping them in.
Answering them as you go. So thank you for that.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, no, great, really, actually, quite smart and sophisticated questions. So clearly, we have a group of people that have already been really paying attention to this issue and trying to think about these things. And it's not as easy as I would like it to be, but but there are good places to start. And that's what I wanted to spend a few minutes and introduce you to Citizens Committee for New York City. So first off, let me see if I can get this to show the full presentation. Oops, hang on a second.
Mike was firing away, responding to those questions. So thank you again.
Okay, can everybody see my screen now? You should see the community leader grant presentation. All right, great. I want to talk about the way that Citizens Committee for New York City gives grants, and kind of give you a sense of how we make our awards across New York City. Let me see if I can. Whoops, hang on a second. Okay, there we go. I think just for some context, right now we're looking for applications for our 2024 grant cycle. I'm going to explain what that means. We made about 200 grants last year in 2024. Most of the people that apply to us are volunteers. So the good news is, to receive funding from Citizens Committee for New York City, you don't have to be a 501c3. You don't even need to have a fiscal sponsor. You can just be some people that are coming together to do something that's good and important in your community. And as you can see from the map on the right-hand side, we do provide projects. We support projects in all 5 boroughs. We work in every city council and assembly district across New York City. So the Community Leaders Grant is really an award of up to $5,000 for people that are trying to make some change happen at the local level. It's really built for small nonprofit organizations, volunteer-led initiatives, schools, so that you can have the resources you need to bring people together, sustain an existing program, or try something new. We don't tell people what to apply to us for. There's not specific types of grants that we're looking for. We're looking for you to tell us what you need in your community. So here's the criteria. You have to be based in New York City, or the project needs to be based in New York City. We've had people that, live upstate, or they live in New Jersey or out on Long Island, but their project is based here in New York City. That's fine. It can be 2 or more people. You don't have to be a nonprofit. We are looking for, if you are a nonprofit, your budget needs to be $250,000 or less. So we are looking for smaller organizations rather than organizations that have more wherewithal. Schools are welcome to apply. They need to be public schools, and you should be talking about your project in terms of its community impact. So don't apply to buy books or to run an after-school program at the school unless it's open to the whole community, okay? I bet there's gonna be a lot of questions about all these things as we go through. That's great. I'm gonna, as soon as we'll have time for Q&A, and I'm really looking forward to hearing some of your ideas out there. Under this award, you can actually apply multiple times. So during our grant cycle, and you'll see we're actually doing 2 grant cycles this year, you can apply more than once in each grant cycle, and we have in fact awarded organizations 2 grants per grant cycle in the past. So it's not unusual that occurs. We don't support fraternal or partisan organizations. So we're looking for organizations. If you are a religious organization, that's okay, as long as your services are open to everybody. And we don't support organizations that are chapters or affiliates of national or larger organizations. We also have a program at the same time for small businesses. So this is for for-profit entities, again, located in New York City, looking for small businesses with 10 or fewer employees who've been in business for at least a couple of years. But here's the tricky thing. A lot of our small business partners, they know how to talk about what their business is, and they know how to pitch themselves that they're trying to get a loan. Asking for a grant, it turns out, is something not a lot of businesses get asked to do. So we want you to talk about your business and the way that it makes a difference in the neighborhood. Are you helping to organize other small businesses or make your community safer? Are you offering products and services to people that couldn't normally afford them? Are you bringing in artists? Are you hiring from the community and training people to grow on to careers in your field? Tell us about how you're really making a difference in your community. So this funding isn't for like covering rent and utilities or fixing up the place. It's really for helping you expand what you're able to do to make your community stronger and bring people together. And this application, we do limit it to one application per grant cycle. Okay. You're not going to read this. I'm not going to read this, but I need you to see this slide. We include this because we want to give an example of how we want people to talk about their work. I'm going to share a link to this presentation in the chat, so you'll be able to grab this whole presentation, including this slide, so you can read it at more of your leisure. But when we ask people to talk about their work, we often have people that are applying to us for the first time, and they're like, I'm not a professional grant writer. How do I do this? Talk to us in your application, just like you were talking to your friend, your family member, your neighbor. Use your language to talk about your work. That's what we want to hear. We want to hear your story and your voice. And in our application, you're going to get asked a couple of things. Who are you? Where are you coming from? What's your organization? Tell us about you, your history. Give us a little bit of sense of who you are. What do you want to do? If you were to receive this funding, what would allow you to do that you can't do right now? And finally, how do you want to use those resources, like a little mini budget? Kind of a budget and a timeline. What would it take for you to be able to run that implementation over the course of the year? So we actually have a current grant cycle open. The deadline for the first cycle is on February 7th. In the bottom of the box here, citizensnyc.org, that's our website. If you go there, you can find all the information about how to apply, including links to the application itself. But just so you know, we're planning to make our decisions for this round in April and then be distributing funds in May. We also have a second round, which will actually open at the beginning of May. The deadline will be in July, and then we're going to make decisions in September and make distributions in October. So we like this idea of having multiple rounds, getting people twice in the year, because we know that certain people have school projects projects that start at a certain time. If you're a community garden, you probably want to be in the first cycle. If you're a school, you might want to be in the second cycle. That's fine. It doesn't matter to apply in the first one or the second one. And yes, you can apply on both. Okay. Some of this I already covered, but this is just some general guidance. We like to include information for people that are trying to approach this for the first time and learning as they go. You are the person we are looking for. We love it when people come to us for their first grant. We love hearing about your work. We love validating you when we're able to provide you support, and we love having you join our community. In addition to being awarded by us, we also bring people together for training opportunities and network building and learning about other ways to raise funds and gather resources in New York City. So, that's important to us too. We're trying to have a relationship with your work and with your community. Let's see. Right. We do information sessions like this all the time, but you can also get personalized support from our beloved colleague, Carlos. He's just a wonderful, wonderful human being. And in order to do that, you can go to this website and go to citizensnyc.org and find an event. And we have office hours every Wednesday from 3 to 4. They're virtual, so you can just log in on Zoom. And you can ask your questions. You can pitch your proposal. You can tell us what you'd like to do. You can share a draft. You can ask about a budget. You can even ask other questions, like some of the things I saw popping up in the chat, like, hey, I'd like to find more volunteers, or I run a community garden. I'm trying to find a food pantry that I can work with because I got to donate all these extra squash and potatoes someplace. We help with all of that. Feel free to reach out to us. Okay. I'm sharing Carlos's contact information. He's a great person to reach out to with any questions about your application, but my email is also in the chat, and it's perfectly fine to reach out to me as well. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing my screen so I can see what's going on in that chat box and see if I can answer some of these questions out there. Oh,
Thank you, Mike.
you're welcome.
I actually had a quick question. In the slides, I saw that you mentioned that there are some grant opportunities for groups who are not registered as a 501c3. Can you talk a little more about that as well?
Yeah, so the way that our grants are built, we're really looking for ideas and we're looking for people that are committed to making change. You don't need to have a nonprofit status already established. And in fact, like a lot of our community-based partners, like a lot of our community garden partners, our food pantry partners, people that are just starting a program, like they want to test out an idea. That's fine. So in order to apply, you're applying as a group. You can't apply for an individual as a grant. But if you have a couple friends and you're getting together and you're trying something together, that's what we're looking for. We're looking for small groups.
Okay, thank you.
I'm just dropping into the chat the link to the presentation I just shared. Anybody can access it there. But of course, you can also find me on my email, or you can reach out to Carlos.
So we
I
have a
think-
question in the chat from Nicole. Is it too late to apply for this grant if you're looking to do something in the summer?
Oh, no. As a matter of fact, that's why we're doing this round now. So again, February 7th is the deadline, but we're hoping to make funds available by May. So yeah, that timing could work really well for you if you're running your programming later in May, June, July, or August. What else you got for me, people? Who's got some ideas out there? I'd love to hear some people that would like to talk about something they're trying to do.
And Mike, if we can have the person who said they got the grant from you guys,
Oh,
or
yeah,
if
I
they could
saw
tell us
that.
what it was for, what did they get their grant for? That would be helpful.
Samuel, you want to share? I don't know if he's still out there.
Okay. But any ideas you guys have?
Yes, I want to share. I had to find the mute button. Sorry. Okay, so we are Geneva Dance and Drum Center. We've been in existence for about 14 years here in the Bronx and throughout the New York City area, delivering dance, training organizations, youth, citizens across the country. Ironically, we came across a grant writer. For 9 years. We have never received a grant. We have a phenomenal grant writer, and he was able to get us secure this grant, but not only secure this grant, but other grants that he's growing with us over the year. So we're excited about Citizens. The relationship was just like Mike described it. Just like he said, Carlos is phenomenal, and take advantage of everything they have to offer. Be your authentic self, just like he said. I tend to shy away from ChatGPT because it has no flavor. It's very vanilla. Be your authentic self and deliver and tell who you really are, your soul. And that's what's going to get you the grant. So thank you, Mike.
Thank you. And I'm so glad that we're able to support your project. And I hope you'll consider applying again if you haven't already planned to do so.
Absolutely.
A good contact to find venues for pop-up pantries. If you are looking for a place to hold a pantry, oh gosh, who might I suggest you reach out to? Folks like your assembly member and your local city council person often are connected to community partners that are good hosts. You might look up some faith-based organizations in your community, or other nonprofit organizations. And you can also, the food bank for the city of New York and the New York City 311 website do list existing food pantries that can also sometimes support or are looking for sometimes
Where's the hand
just
raised?
oh sorry
Yes.
sometimes pantries just
Same.
I
operate
said,
one or
where's
two
the
days.
hand raised?
I'm sorry, what's that, love?
No, keep going. She was just looking for the hand raise button.
Oh, okay, great. I'm not going to go on for long because I see a couple of people have their hand raises, but sometimes pantries just operate a couple days a week and they like to work with other people so they can extend those hours. So lots of really interesting opportunities out there. Okay, I see Althea. What you got for me?
You're on mute.
Yes.
There you go.
Yeah, so I am from the group called Plants, Preserving Lincoln's Abundant Natural Treasures. We got your grant 5 times. We're very much involved with Carlos. And I know that last year we hosted a grant class where Carlos was moderating over, and we had like 25 people that came in to learn how to do it. So I think people in their community could host the grant classes as well.
Oh,
So
yes.
yes, we
I'm
got.
so glad you said
Uh-huh.
that
Mm-hmm.
And what
because
is the grant for?
The grant was for green, tree bed care and creating green space. But we coupled that with doing the greenest block in Brooklyn with the Botanic Gardens, and we are like 4-time winners. We are the greenest block in Brooklyn 2024. We'll be sitting on the panel for Brooklyn Bloom with the Botanic Gardens this year. And every year you have to sit out. If you win, like this year, we're sitting out, but we start doing mentorship. So we have some of our mentees coming in for the grant. So we're gonna sit with them and do the grant together so that they could get their communities ready as well.
that's wonderful. It's so great that you're hosting some information and outreach sessions. We love to work with other community partners to get out into your neighborhoods to talk about these grants.
Yes, I today I met with the 77th precinct because I'm a fashion designer, a trade, kind of not in the industry anymore. So I volunteered to help work with some young people that they'll be bringing in for the summer. And their budget was seeming very small. So now I think I'm going to put the grant in for working on that for the before February 7th.
Thanks, Ms. Althea.
Yeah.
Appreciate it. I see Ms. Minerva, looks like you have a question. You got your hand up.
Hello, everyone. I'm Minerva Coffey from the Social Justice Network. My question is, and I'm going to keep it very respectful just because of time. I do have a nonprofit. I do have like all the paperwork together. I've never received big grants. We have been, hanging on by the bootstraps. Basically, I'm a first generation immigrant, and so when I hear about this grant, one of the ladies that volunteered for us is here. I would love to apply for the organization, but our volunteer does so much work. Is there a way that, right, that we can, like you said, yes, you would love the group to get it, but I would love my volunteer to just have this funding and continue to do the work that they're doing and that she's doing. But I also would love the organization to get some. So is there a way that it can be done separate but yet together?
Oh, I love questions like this. How do you hack the system?
Not really.
Um,
I mean, this is you
oh
said
no, no, I have an
everyone for
answer.
the work, right? So we
I,
have different programs.
yeah, no, I know. I have a good answer for you. Okay, so first off, it's why I love this question because we do get this question quite often, and it's a really, really smart one. So yes, by all means, Social Justice Network, you guys should be applying, and we'd love to hear about your program for your volunteer. If they're part of a volunteer crew, if they have a couple of folks together and they're doing work that complements what you're trying to accomplish through their volunteer engagement, they can apply as their own group to support what you're doing at SJN. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Thank
Okay.
you.
Yep. No worries. Love that question. Thank you so much.
If I can just add, if I can just add on to that one as well, too, is I would also encourage you to look at, if you haven't applied already, to the North Star Fund. I used to be the board chair there, and they often pride themselves on being some of the first funders for grassroots organizations in order for them to be able to hire staff. So part of the Mike was talking about the hacking, but it's bringing together different resources, right? So by being able to bring together some of these other resources in order to get ready for the next grant and the larger grant, I think is really part of your strategy.
Can you put that information in the chat, please?
I
Thank
most
you
certainly
so
will.
much. Appreciate everyone.
Stephanie has her hands up.
And how are we doing with time? Are we good on time?
We're good on time.
And there was a great question in the chat also once Stephanie is done from Layla.
Hello, good evening, everyone. My question is, um, I have a group that is called Bronx Organized Parents with some parent leaders, but we were able to establish a EIN number for a nonprofit, but I want to know, how do we register? and how to go from there to get to the grants. And then I have my second question is that then I have an LLC for a program that I wanted to do for IEPs for families with disabilities. It's called NYC Families Empowered to Achieve. And as well, how do I have a EIN number for LLC, but how do I get to register and what do I do as next steps? And thank you.
So Stephanie's question is, what does she do after she gets her EIN?
Okay, this is where I'm not an expert on this. What I can suggest though, is there are some really great nonprofit legal services organizations in the city that offer a lot of guidance about how to navigate the whole 501c3 process, because it isn't the most easy thing in the world to do. New York Lawyers for the Public Interest is fantastic. The Legal Aid Society is wonderful. I'm going to grab links to both of those and I'll drop them both in the chat as well. So just so you know, like, it's complicated enough that I've been doing this for a long time and I don't know how to do it. So this is, I work with attorneys and other folks that can provide us with that kind of guidance.
Thank you for that. Because that led to my next thought, which is because we have to file taxes, correct?
You do, everybody that's incorporated has to file taxes in one way or another.
Okay.
You have to file a specific kind of taxes if you are a nonprofit organization. And again, that's one of the things you want to look up. There'll be guidance about that at places like New York Lawyers for the Public Interest and the Legal Aid Society and others.
Thank you again.
You're so
And
welcome.
if I can just add to that one, because there was a question about it in the chat. So yes, as a nonprofit, you're filing a 990. And so you don't charge off deductions for a nonprofit the same way you do as an individual business. So you don't have to worry about charging off those various different things as a nonprofit. But obviously, New York Lawyers for Public Interest, some other places can help you with that. But it's kind of the difference between being a small business and being a nonprofit. And so those lines, you just want to make sure that you get some support in making sure that you're not crossing them.
Thank you. Nzinga has her hand up. She has a question.
And
Mike, did you want to say something while Nzinga comes on?
oh, wait.
Okay. Nzinga, if you want to unmute. And who's
I
that?
just unmuted. Thank
There you
you.
What's your question?
Peace and blessings, everyone. So I just heard my colleague, I'm also with the Social Justice Network, and we do so much community outreach. Like we've been in operation, I think this is the 4th year, and we do backpack drives, we do toy drives, clothing drives, food drives. We hold seminar workshops, and at those workshops, people want to eat because we do presentations with people that are returning citizens from being incarcerated, some for years, some for not so long. We provide resources to them at these workshops, health information, employment, housing, but we spend a lot of out-of-pocket money. And just trying to figure out is that a criteria for one of these grants? Like, how can we, because obviously helping returning citizens into our society, helping them find homes, find a place to live, or housing, I should say, find employment, get them the mental health services that they need, all of that, provide clothes to women and men so they look decent when they go on job interviews. Is that something Like, is that something that we would be able to write a grant for? I'm the family advocate for the organization. So I do a lot of outreach to these families who can't afford to go upstate to see their loved ones who are incarcerated, who can't afford the phone fees, the astronomical phone fees. So yeah.
Yep. So certainly to Citizens Committee for New York City, you absolutely can apply for a grant to us. And I wish you would. Sounds like what you're doing is really important and powerful. Um,
Say that again. You said it so fast.
sorry. It's Citizens Committee for New York City.
Got that. Okay.
You can look this up online, but I'll drop the
In the chat.
link to the website in the chat, and you can definitely.
Okay. Okay. Appreciate that.
Yeah, appreciate you.
Thank you.
Alrighty, Jeanette also had her hand raised earlier. Just want to make sure she gets to ask her question as well.
And we have to be mindful of time, so let's, it's 2 hands raised. Who's next, you said, Darcia?
Jeanette Bergelston, I believe. Jeanette Bocanegra.
Has her hand raised? I don't see that.
She had a question earlier.
It was way earlier. I just want to thank you for the presentation. I did start as a very small organization doing some local work. Been very fortunate to work with large organizations, but as the small ones, right, that we're looking at are usually the ones that are doing the work and not getting compensated, right, because of all those other restrictions. And it really does cost a lot of money, right, to be able to have a strong finance team, to have a fund development team, to have a grant writer, right, to make sure that your CHAR 500, your 990, right, these are things that I was not aware of, right, when I inherited a national organization. But the work for me is more important when you can do local work. And at all the small organizations that are doing the real rooted, grounded work are not the ones that are getting the funding, right? And all these restrictions that allow you to be as professional as anyone can be, right? But it also takes money. It does take money to really establish a organization, right? Their development, whether it's the capacity, right? You can start as one staff member with volunteers, but you also want to make sure that the community that you're serving, you're not keeping them at a poverty level, right? That you're also supporting them and strengthening their ability to financially be stable. So anyway, thank you. I also did a lot of work many years ago with the New York Urban League. So, this kind of brought me back and some great memories. So thank you. And the citizens, I wish I wasn't at that level, right? That I'm getting good grants, because the small grants are the ones that allow us to really do the rooted work, right? To really meet the needs of the community, to put those dollars in the hands of the community folks. So thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm able to hear you.
Hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. Clinton had a question in the chat. Our church does summer community outreach every July. Will we be able to apply for a Citizens Committee grant to enhance our outreach?
100%. Absolutely. And again, strongly encourage you to come to office hours with my colleague Carlos, or email me if you have any questions. Happy to get you started on that process.
The hands that are raised, did they ask the question already? I see Taryn and Nicole.
Not yet. There were some questions before them in the chat. Chantel asked, are there any resources that can help with marketing for a nonprofit?
Chantal, sensitive to time. Chantal, what I would suggest is, depends on what kind of marketing you're trying to do. If you're trying to do like social media marketing, There are like, you can get grants for things like Facebook ads that might help you get the word out about what you do. But there's not a lot of grants for like creating a marketing campaign. That's looking for grants to do that is just like looking for grants to do anything else. So it's not any harder or easier than just raising money generally.
Alrighty, and we also had a question from Walter in the chat. Can I get funding for project director salary and stipends for volunteers?
In our grant program, you can use, we give you the money to use how you want to use it. So you can, you don't have to use it just for supplies, or, you can use it to help pay people, pay for time. You can use it to help buy materials. You can use it to help engage your community members. You have 100% flexibility with our awards. That's not true with every funder, but it is true with us.
Thank you. And Taryn has her hand raised.
Hey guys, how are you? First of all, Assemblymember, thank you so much for doing this. This is incredible, and I've never seen anybody do this before. So I actually joined because I'm a member of a board for a nonprofit in Brooklyn that's really struggling. They provide free mental health services, and because of the demand, they have put all of their money into clinician services, and so are really now very stretched to make payroll and have operating money. So I'm just wondering if anybody has any information on organizations that fund, maybe it's a bridge loan, or, but can more quickly provide the funding. They've been in existence for 20 years, so they're not new, but they're struggling financially right there for operating funds.
Arva, can you speak to that? Like gap funding?
Yes, as a matter of fact, I can. So if it's a gap in a contract that's already been executed with the city, you can go to the Fund for the City of New York. The Fund for the City of New York has a operating fund that's all they do is provide that bridge for nonprofits who already have a funded grant. There's also nonprofit organizations that are specifically designed to work with nonprofits who are having cash flow issues, one of which is called the True Fund, TRU, and then FUND, and I'll drop it into the chat. But True Fund helps specifically work with nonprofits, and they not only provide you with the loan, but also work with the organization to figure out if there's anything around your financials that they can help maneuver, that sort of thing. There are some banks that claim to be friendly to nonprofits, and those are Amalgamated Bank as well as Key Bank, and so they have a nonprofit wing or practice that specifically works with nonprofits as well. And so I'll put all of those in the chat as well.
Okay, great. They actually are not funded really. They have some small discretionary funds from the city, but they really do not get city or state funding, which I've spoken to them about. So it sounds like the True Fund and maybe Amalgamated and Key Bank might be the way to go. Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
We had a question in the chat from Nazir. How could he go about applying for a startup grant for Malik Dance Theater?
So again, just for Citizens NYC, just apply. Come to an office hour, learn about the application, get it in there before February 7th. But I think just let me mention, everybody's looking for funding all the time. It's the number one job you have when you're running a nonprofit organization. You have to just be out there constantly looking for money. And there are some resources that can help you do that. I dropped one in the chat earlier. It's called Candid, which allows you to do research on foundations to understand who gives money for what. I'm going to drop in another one that I really like. It's a new tool. It's called Impala. They're actually a Brooklyn-based organization, and they're also very good for kind of researching grant opportunities. And I'm going to drop in a tiny little one that I think is kind of interesting called Grant.io. So I'll put all these in the chat.
And let me just say, while something else that for you all to think about is that corporations have to give away money to they usually give it to nonprofits as a tax write-off. And so you want to think about what companies would align with the work that you're doing. So one of my constituents is not on this call, but he works with students and he helps them with back to school or back to college resources. So he'll go to get Colgate, funding from Colgate, funding from sneaker stores. It's just different funding that aligns with the work that he's doing. So that's something that everyone else should be looking into. These large corporations have to give away money. It's a write-off for them. So we should be in communications with the PepsiCo of the world and the Coca-Colas and anyone who is in alignment with what you are trying to do.
Thank you, Assemblymember. We have Nicole's hand is raised.
Good evening, everyone. First, I just want to say thank you to Mr. Bennett, who told me about this event. And also, I want to say thank you to Assembly Jackson for hosting this event and giving us this information. It was two questions I have. I was going to actually put one in the chat. One of them is, what is there a really big difference between the 501c3 and the LLC? And then the second question would be, I heard Ms. Jackson say, Assembly Jackson say that you have to align yourself with companies that are, kind of, I guess, doing or supporting some of the work that you want to be done. My question with that is there any other companies that you know of that are be giving money for like gun violence?
So do you guys want to talk about yes, there is a difference between the LLC and the 501c3. So I don't know if you want to go into detail, but yes, they're different.
Okay, so is there any way I would be able to, either meet with you or your office and just, really be able to sit down and get a better understanding of that, of the two?
Again, that's probably a better question for an organization that works specifically with folks around their legal and tax and accounting issues. So I think it's a better question for folks like the Lawyers Alliance for New York or New York Lawyers for the Public Interest. And again, they should be able to, you probably can even find guidance directly on their website about those questions.
Mm-hmm. And if you did decide that you wanted to go, I'm sorry, I just wanted to say,
Go ahead, I'm
Nicole,
sorry.
No, I just want to say, Nicole, if you did decide to go into the LLC side, which is to start a small business, and like I said, like the biggest distinction is the tax designation, right? So if you did decide to go into an LLC and start a small business, the New York Urban League does have a small business solutions center. So we would help you in that process of starting a small business if that's the direction that you wanted to go into. But Mike's absolutely right. You should definitely speak to folks who think about this all day, every day, so that you can think about what are the best implications for you and your family or community, whether you want to go the nonprofit or for-profit route.
Can I just say, Arva, like somebody somewhere should write an article about this, because there are like a whole series of things you need to think about in making a decision between being a nonprofit or being a for-profit. And when you make that choice, it's pretty much permanent. Like it's really, really hard to undo that.
Mm-hmm.
So, if what you're doing really has like a direct revenue capability, you think you can earn money doing it, for instance, it's probably better to go with a for-profit. If you're always going to be out looking for resources because you need to subsidize or support the work through philanthropic partners, then it is probably better to go as a nonprofit. That's just one example of the kind of question you need to be asking yourself when you're making that decision.
Ms. McCroskey has her hand raised.
And while we wait for her to come in, Dorcia, are we talking briefly about our grant process, or is that for a separate?
That's for another workshop.
Okay, so let's just remind people that the state does, your state legislatures do usually have grant funding that they award yearly. And so Dorcia will, or someone else from our office will host another conversation around how do we give out our own funding.
Thank you, Assemblymember.
All right. Okay. Hi, everyone. Thank you. Thank you for allowing me to be here. One question I wanted to ask and I didn't get an answer is how many times we can put this grant in? Like I do wraparound service here. I have like a resource center in the South Bronx area, and we do wraparound services. So we do more than one thing for the community. And I was told that we can put in for different services that we provide. Is that true?
So are you asking specifically about Citizens Committee for New
The
York City?
citizen, yes, like more than one, because I remember last year they was for $1,000. Now it went up to
That's correct.
5,000. Yes, because right now we are in desperate need of help. I've been at my resource center for like a long time with no support. We are running out of money, trying to keep the doors open. Our population is really broad. We work with survivors of human trafficking, domestic violence,
Hey, Ms.
and
Keisha,
homeless. So,
one question.
the
Is the
question,
question, can you get multiple
yeah.
grants at the
Mhm.
same time?
Like just
Or
like
Citizens Committee?
once, like say like if I wanted to put in, if I'm doing a workshop on domestic violence or, or we doing something like financial literacy
Gotcha.
we do a lot,
So Mike,
right?
is that possible for the same organization to ask for money in the same grant cycle for two different things?
Yes, you can put in more than one application in the Community Leaders Grant for the current cycle. So if you wanted to put in several right now, you could. We don't typically award more than two, but it is
Okay.
possible to get more than one.
All right, thank you. And I just wanted to put it out here that I do have physical space and I would love to work with any not-for-profit that wants to have come and work with us. We would love to have you out here.
Put your email in the chat, Ms.
Okay.
McCusker.
Okay.
Put your email in the chat, just in case
Okay.
somebody will reach out.
Thank you.
Alrighty, Katisha Deacon had a question. She had her hand raised.
Yes, hi. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much, Assemblywoman Jackson, for this, because this is like it answered so much questions, so helpful. So my question initially for Mike was about the funding, but you sort of answered it around if we wanted to use the funding, like you said, we could use the funding for anything. So I've been operating as a nonprofit for about 2021 for about like 4 years now, running like different youth organizations within the community. And I've been trying, and my goal has been to hone it all in, even though it's 3 branches of programming, to hone it all under one umbrella. And my question was more so about using the funding to get the 501c3, because we are a grassroots. A lot of our funding and resources come from partnering with other organizations. So I wanted to know if that was possible, but then I was just thinking about like the timeline and if it would make more sense to wait for the payout to solidify as a 501c3 or just look into the resources that you had already provided. So I think you sort of answered my question.
Okay. Okay, great. We probably wouldn't give a grant for you to get your 501c3 because there's so many people out there that can help you do that for free right now.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So some of the things that we dropped in the chat earlier, like New York Lawyers for the Public Interest, Lawyers Alliance for New York, Nonprofit New York, the Support Center for Nonprofit Management, all those folks have a lot of information about how to get that 501c3 and including like step-by-step guides and things like that.
Okay, so I completed the application. It's more so the payment of it. I wanted to streamline it mainly through the business. Yeah, so I finished out the application. I just wanted to make sure like the funding coming out of pocket and the financials of the nonprofit organization. So just getting support with that, the payment.
Do you mean the payment for I'm sorry, I'm not quite clear what you're.
Filed, the actual file, the 501c3, is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay. How much is that normally?
I guess not much money.
On the IRS page, when I finished the application, it came up to about like a little over $600.
Can my team put Bronx Foundation's contact information in the chat? Reach out to Bronx Foundation and see if they have support with payments. I'm not fully sure, but they may be able to help you.
Okay, thank you so much.
Nathia has her hand raised.
Hi, can you please just elaborate on what consists of a group and terms of how much of grants and how much of the grants?
Wait, I don't think I understood the question. What was that again?
You said a group can apply, and so what would consist of a group? How many people? How many people, or does anyone have to have a 501c3? Could it just be regular, folks who don't have any type of business structure? Yeah.
Yep, that's right. So it's a group of 2 or more people, and you do not need to have a 501c3 or a fiscal sponsor. You can just be a volunteer-led group of people.
Okay, and how much are the grants?
Grants are up to $5,000.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
And Mike, I had a group that wanted to do they wanted to paint over their buildings. I think it was something about painting their neighborhood. And it was just like it was 5 of them. One person applied, they got the grant, and they were able to paint their community. So it's stuff like that, beautifying as well, beautifying the neighborhood.
I'm sorry,
Yeah,
one more, I'm sorry.
no,
Is
go ahead. Go
for
ahead.
the 5 boroughs?
Yeah, all across New York City.
Okay, thank you.
Jackie also had a question in the chat. How does a nonprofit get a operational budget to pay salaries? We're going to take 2 more questions.
So basically for any part of your nonprofit's operations, you're just raising money. And with that, if you're under $250,000, certainly apply to us. Just make sure you're explaining, like, don't just say, I need money to pay my people. But I want to hear you tell me, we all need money to pay our people. What I want to hear you tell me is what that money is going to help you do. What's the difference you're going to get to make in your community? And again, feel free to come to one of our office hours or something like that if you want to kind of brainstorm how you want to talk about that in your grant application. Now, the other thing I'll say, look, I've heard this from several people tonight. Most corporations and foundations do not fund nonprofits that have less than $250,000 a year in their annual budget, plus audited financial statements and a full-time staff person. It's just, there aren't a lot of funders that do that. North Star Fund, Citizens Committee for New York City, Brooklyn.org has some special programs. There's a few like little things that are out there, but it's really, really, really tough to get money when you're small. And as we also know, that's 75% of the nonprofits that are out there are in that category. So it's very competitive, and it's not easy to do. And there's a much larger conversation around this question that it starts to move us into like policy discussions and something like that, what I'm not going to get into tonight. I'm happy to have that conversation with the assembly member later. But what I would say is the journey of going from 0 to 250 is the hardest part of launching any nonprofit organization because the resources are very hard to get a hold of. So I'm glad we're here. We're going to do everything we can to provide support and help folks through that journey, but it is a really challenging part of the process.
I think that we can wrap up. Any final words from Arva and Mike? Thank you everyone for being here.
I just want to say thank you. I love these conversations. I find them incredibly hopeful and energizing. I'm always so, kind of moved by what people are doing in their communities. There's so many great stories, and we want to support you all. So please take the time to send an application to us. I want to thank Arva. Clearly, it's just great to have an expert to share their insights and to be encouraging. And the Urban League just does incredible work in the city. And I want to thank our assembly member. Thank you, Ms. Jackson, for just being an inspiration and bringing us all together in this conversation. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Arva.
Yes, and Mike, you've said so much. So thank you so much to our Assemblywoman for her vision and putting this together. And if ever there was a time or a place that our communities need you all's effort, it is now. So if there's any ways that the New York Urban League can be supportive, either in our Small Business Solutions Center, if you do decide to go the LLC route, and or when it's time for you to apply for a capacity building grant, with our nonprofit stabilization fund. I've gotten a couple emails from folks DMing me, happy to meet and talk to you. Like I said, this is the time when advocacy is needed more than ever. Thank you.
Absolutely. I want to thank Arva and Mike for even sharing their expertise with us tonight. I do nothing by myself. I say thank you to my team who actually did this today and put it together and made it amazing. I want to tell you all, if you want to continue to get information similar to this and know about what's coming up, you must follow us on social media. My social media is popping. You can follow our YouTube page, us on Instagram, Chantel Jackson 79, us on TikTok, AM Chantel Jackson 79. And yes, get all the information. The chat has all of our contact info, but we are constantly updating the community with what is going on. So thank you all again. I'm passing it over to Dorcia.
Thank you, Assemblymember Jackson, and thank you, Mike and Arva, so much for your presentation and just sharing this information tonight. Just wanted to also just put my information in the chat if you guys have any questions about how to go about getting a discretionary grant or wanting to know more about the process. Please feel free to reach out to me via email. Happy to answer any questions. Our office is looking to host a similar workshop, but covering discretionary and capital grants. So we'll share more information about that soon.
And
Thank you.
don't forget the survey. The survey is coming, so please fill out the survey when you get it in the next few days. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.